the Lord, glorify the Lord, glorify the Lord with me. I sought the Lord and he answered me. From all my terrors he has set me free. Come join with me and bless his holy name. Glorify the Lord, glorify the Lord, glorify the Lord with me.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Just before the Jews passed over, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And in the temple he found people selling cattle and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting at the counters there. Making a whip out of some cord, he drove them all out of the temple, cattle and sheep as well. Scattered the money changers' coins, knocked their tables over, and said to the pigeon sellers, "Take all this out of here and stop turning my Father's house into a market." Then his disciples remembered the words of Scripture, "Zeal for your house will devour me." The Jews intervened and said, "What sign can you show us to justify what you have done?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this sanctuary, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this sanctuary. Are you going to raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the sanctuary that was his body. And when Jesus rose from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the Scripture and the words he had said. During his stay in Jerusalem for the Passover, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he gave. But Jesus knew them all and did not trust himself to them. He never needed evidence about any man. He could tell what a man had in him. This is the gospel of the Lord.
I remember once being away on holidays and going out for the day and coming back and discovered that I had been robbed, that something was stolen. And I remember feeling very angry, and I kind of nursed it, different times during the day, that somebody got into our apartment and had gone through our personal things. And it kind of felt as if you were personally violated. And I heard the stories of many people afterwards who suffered much more serious about people breaking into their homes or violating their persons, and the anger that goes with it. In the gospel today we have an angry Jesus. He's angry because he loves. He loves his Father, and his Father's chosen place to be with his people, his temple, being debased, becoming a marketplace. And the cheapening of that holy place really annoys him, that he gets a whip. And there's great energy in the gospel today, because he says he drove them out. The way a man almost in the Western would drive cattle, they're stampeding, he drove them out. Here's a Jesus full of passion. And the disciples, when they remembered afterwards that passionate moment in the life of Jesus, they were able to connect in their minds and say, "Zeal for your house has consumed me. That here's the passionate, loving Jesus. And if you're passionate about anything, and you love anything or anybody, love has to find expression in anger when people are debasing themselves or others, cheapening life. So a question today strikes me in the Gospel: what and who are we passionate about? Who do we love enough for the way people treat them to anger us, and that anger to prompt us into effective action? And anger is a positive human emotion. Feelings don't have brains. There is an anger which is reactive, and we're all pretty good at that. Something annoys us and we sting back. But there's also an anger which is God-given, that makes us respect our limits, our capacities, and the limits and the capacities of others, but an anger that comes from love. The whole area of child sexual abuse, I've often thought that if someone sexually abused some of my nieces or nephews, my automatic instinct would be I'd want to kill them. I'm that passionate about them. When you're distant, we're perhaps not as passionate. And especially people that we trusted. The violation of trust, particularly the violation of trust put in priests. Many of us were blinded by greed. It's usually after the event that we begin to look back and see patterns. Like, for example, you will get commentators saying the church is always on about sex, but in fact it's our society that's always on about sex and the debasing and the dehumanizing. Why is it people didn't hear the call of John Paul II? Put people before profit. Look at the trust, the Celtic Tiger. We had people like Anthony Sinclair, who at that stage was going through a Gnostic phase, saying, and I remember saying for quite a number of years, the God in the Republic of Ireland, and he lived here, is Mammon. We heard the words, but it didn't strike home. And now we're suffering the effects of greed, some people more responsible for that greed, and deserving to go to prison, in my judgment. But somehow or other, something that affected us, it was an opportunity for more money to feed greed. I was at a meeting during the week and people were sharing, and one lady said, it's not the children's fault that we gave them everything. My nieces and nephews, she said, have everything. And the capacity to play and make fun was diminished. I remember one of our men, and his little grandnephew was an expert on computers. And he said he went down one Christmas and there he was, this little thing running around the floor, managing the computer and the mouse. The next